Hi everyone, thank you for joining us. I am talking to Michael Barnett, a digital activist in the area of social equality and human rights. Thank you very much for chatting to us today, Michael.
Thank you, Adam.
I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about your background, what you've done in the past and what's brought you here to me talking to you today.
Right. Well, look, I've been involved in a lot of activism over the past roughly 20 years, primarily around equality for people who are same-sex attracted, gender diverse, so LGBTI people, primarily focused on raising awareness around the harms that can come to people who experience intolerance and about minimising the negative outcomes. That's what's driven me in this activism, which comes from a number of different places, the government and religious communities and people who perhaps less enlightened.
Yeah, exactly. And so I met you initially. We were putting together some film screenings, and I was put onto you as a founding member of Aleph. Can you tell us a little bit about the kind of organisation that you have helped drive and been involved with?
It's not. I wasn't actually one of the founding members. I came along in its first year of inception, so in fact, it facilitated or was part of the process of me coming to terms with my sexuality that I came out through this group, Aleph Melbourne, and now it's actually just gone 20 and making a documentary about the first 20 years of history of that organisation. I have been for the last number of years. Well, I was at one point the president of the group, and then we changed the structure of the group and been the convener of it for a number of years now. So it's taken a lot of my time and energy. I feel it's a very important cause.
And your work in that regard, I mean, we're looking in terms of in the context of social media and what that enables people to do, the potential democratizing power of social media, probably in this area as more than anyone else, any other area, that being social equality, human rights. You see both the potential productive, constructive nature of social media use and the destructive nature of it, because you've always got kind of both sides, playing with these kinds of online tools. We're really interested, I guess, predominantly in what experiences you've had in using the online world to further causes of human equality.
Yeah, so Adam, I've got a couple of blogs that I run. One is blogs or WordPress websites that I utilise for disseminating information. WordPress is a fairly useful tool. It's freely available through WordPress. Automatic is the company that provides us the sites. One of them is a self-hosted WordPress blog, and the other one is their hosting of it. In fact, I have others, but they're just more like test sites for me. And the Aleph Melbourne website has a WordPress blog underneath it, or a WordPress site, self-hosted. And I post news articles, content to that. It also functions as a website in itself with ways to contact us and information about the organisation. I'm not a very advanced user of WordPress, but I guess I know enough about doing it to make it work to my needs. And integration with social media like Twitter and Facebook and other plugins as required. So you have all of that at your hands.
Yeah, and you don't need to be a really advanced user. I mean, I still for WordPress sites, so I can't remember how many there are. I don't pay a cent for them. Just basically we get students on these sites, and you just work it out.
And you can pay for more advanced features if you want to, depending on your needs and how unique you want it to be and integrated and functional. But it can be very inexpensive to run these yourself.
One major thing I found in some research into non-human animal rights and sort of welfare activists who are typically vegan in their lifestyles is that the use of social media is very much not only a driving force of getting your message out there, interacting with people, but also forming a sense of solidarity and reinforcing you in your purpose.
Right.
The fact that you've kind of are able to communicate on a day-to-day basis with people who share your view of the world, who are activists in your area in particular.
Right.
Does that, I imagine, also translate into the human rights area? The way that social media can work and kind of motivate and also bring confidence and comfort to people.
I do find that a lot of the people that in the conversations that I'm driving through, I have a very large Facebook group that I run called Proud to be a Second Class Australian, which has at the moment close on 2,700 members. Not all of them are commenting at once, fortunately.
Good for you.
but it does reach to that many people, and I do find that there is a huge amount of commonality between the lived experience of these people. That simply the fact that they have a common cause does bring them together, and a sense of injustice that they feel perpetrated against them is enough to make them want to do this.
Really interesting thing that I heard from your partner. We were having dinner about a week ago, and your partner, Gregory, said something really fascinating that I hadn't really thought of in relation to digital activism before. He was saying that the great thing about the activism that you do is that you don't position yourself and you're not the central kind of personality or figure in what you do. You don't try to be, and you essentially try to be, as you said, you drive conversation, but you do a lot of the networking between people. You find an issue or a person who wants to get connected to an issue, and your network, which has been built over a sustained period of time, that's one of the great things that you've been able to work out how to do, is to connect people with issues. And that's really interesting to me because a lot of the research on social media is about the nature of celebrity and kind of, the centrality of the individual figure who, is the key to being the face of an issue. So can you comment on that? That's sort of putting you in a really difficult position, I suppose, a tricky position. But I think that I had never heard that kind of thing before. And it shows something about digital activism that I think is really important, because we assume that a lot of what I do is about online identity and how you portray yourself, and you're thinking about that all the time. But in your digital activism, your central focus is the issue and the message and progress in certain areas. So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Well, it's to me, it seems really obvious that if you want to influence people in a certain way, you find the people who are most likely to be able to influence the people you're trying to influence. And if I am not that person in that scenario, and I know someone might be better inclined to be able to influence them, then see if the other people are more likely to want to participate, if they're on the same page with your cause. It's simple, and if you know enough people and you can reach out to them, or it isn't hard to find people to reach out to, and you only have so many hours a day.
Yeah.
And other people, it's distributing the workload, really. And it happens in any context. I mean, I don't know why more people don't do it, but maybe they do. But for me, it's not about celebrity, it's about outcome, and I don't mind whether I'm visible or invisible in the process, as long as I see an outcome eventuate. That's for me the most important part of this.
Absolutely, yeah. But at the same time, it's really interesting. You have, in one sense, become a persona who the media goes to for comment on issues, and you were I don't know if you want me to use the word star, you were a character within an episode of an SBS documentary recently. And I imagine all of the social media kind of activity around that. Do you want to speak to any of that?
Well, I mean, the fact that Gregory and I participated in the SBS Living with the Enemy series and gave up on camera 10 days of our lives, narrowed down to an hour episode, which also included 3 months of very complicated planning prior to that. It wasn't a simple and straightforward process, and we probably wouldn't have chosen to do it if we'd known what it was going to be like. But we did it because we felt the cause was important enough, not that we wanted to have our heads on TV.
Yeah.
It was taking on, it was living with another person whose opinion, who disagreed with you on a fundamental issue. That isn't something, and there was no financial gain from this, so it wasn't something either of us wanted to do. But we felt so passionate about the issue, marriage equality in this particular case, that we were prepared to sacrifice that much of our lives to this. And it did drive conversation, and it did get people engaged in the cause that we were fighting for.
And I imagine so the impact of being on that kind of, I suppose, I don't want to say mainstream compared to social media, because everything's mainstream now in that sense, but your activity, your kind of people taking notice, you must have noticed a bit of an upsurge in your neck of the woods, I suppose.
Well, look, I have a fairly busy Gmail inbox at the best of times. I subscribe to a lot of lists and content, and social media reminds me about a lot of things a lot of the time. And at the time that we did the SBS show, the Wednesday night that it went to air, my inbox was flooded in a way that I've never seen before. And it took me 3 weeks to get through the backlog of email just from all of that one night show on TV.
Yeah.
So the world just went insane. The overload from social media was just overwhelming. And Twitter and Facebook and everything just went off all at once.
Right. Yeah.
Catastrophically.
You need another holiday straight after it, I imagine.
It was diabolical, but it was good. I mean, it was powerful because it showed that people were engaging and that they were passionate and they were listening, and there was virtually no negative feedback. I don't remember anything negative come out of all of this. And all the radio interviews we did and all the TV or media interviews we did, it was an overwhelming period of time. Probably wouldn't have been possible without social media at all.
Yeah, and that's kind of like, I guess, the high level form of validation when you see that huge, almost the equivalent of going viral. And that's coming back to what I was talking about with people who gain the positive benefit of being connected in the online world, because I mean, working full time, for instance, in an unrelated industry, you are limited in your time, but social media enables you to engage in ways and around issues that you cannot possibly do the same in the same way that you get the kind of validation through rallies and protests and so on. You can't do that every day.
No. And look, it's interesting, being in a working environment does limit your ability to engage. It is possible to be creative in the way that you engage on social media, and you can use things like scheduling media releases at a particular time. You can schedule tweets. You can, depending on the mechanism in Facebook, you can, if it's a public Facebook page, schedule posts to go out at a certain time. You can do a number of things to get around your availability or lack of availability. Not always possible to utilize all of those, and sometimes critical time frames need to be met, but with social media, stuff that needs to happen immediately, if you've got a campaign running and you need to have prompt responses to certain outcomes, these things are time critical, and if you're tied up in whatever it is in a working scenario, it's difficult to balance that all out effectively at times. But you can be creative, and if you go for a coffee break, you can do a few things in a few minutes, or
Exactly.
wandering between meetings or waiting for the phone to ring for an appointment or something. Whatever. There are opportunities, so it is possible, and the media, the format is very flexible.
The opportunities and benefits there are clear, and they're multifaceted. There's so many of them. I'm wondering if you can speak to perhaps the downsides, as you may see them, of social media. I guess the clear and obvious one is that conversations run two or more ways, and you've got a lot of stuff that social media is used for that doesn't necessarily reinforce human equality and those kinds of issues, and it sort of can be used in opposition to the arguments that digital activists want to put out there. So can you speak to any of those or any others that you've come across?
One of the issues with engaging on social media is that it consumes an inordinate amount of time, and the more time you throw at it, the more time it consumes. So it's about, I guess, in many ways, time management and knowing how to, say I've had enough, or that's sufficient effort put into that. People who come along and want to engage on the topic, but then take it in a different direction to where you want it to go. People who come along and agitate in a very unhelpful way, either in your pool of supporters or from outside that. And so I guess it's about planning for all of that, or not so much if you can't plan for it, how to handle it at the time it happens. And I guess it's about good management. If you're running a large group with a lot of people, you don't want to get the bulk of the people offside by a negative comment that someone's made or an unfortunate interpretation of something. And being online where there is no human interaction, no physical human presence, nuance disappears immediately, where things like emoticons and emoji are quite helpful. A lot of people don't necessarily understand how to use that, or haven't had the years of experience of where it can go wrong to understand the fallibility of the process. So I think it's about giving people a little bit of latitude in what they mean, and trying to not necessarily jump to the worst outcomes or the worst interpretation of what they've said, and hopefully let's be a little bit mature. Sometimes people come along who just really want to cause trouble, and that's all they want to do. And hopefully you can identify that and mitigate any problems as soon as possible there.
Yeah. That's a fantastic point. I mean, instantaneous communication so often brings out instantaneous judgments, and being able to push yourself back and look from a critical standpoint to really, in digital activism.
And some people excel in online communication, and some people excel in face-to-face communication. And it's about a matter of balancing out the two. And some people are limited in their ability to have a one-on-one conversation in person, but they really do well online. And other people do hopelessly online. Or they might be on their phone, whereas another person sitting at their keyboard. And it's really difficult to engage on a mobile phone on a crowded tram, and someone's all of a sudden tagged you on a comment that you're required to or expected to respond instantly on some very critical topic. And you've got a crowded train where people are jostling you, or a tram that takes off at 500 kilometres an hour, and you're trying to just stand up straight.
Yeah.
It's difficult. The places that we use social media are really inconvenient at times.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
So context, I mean, one of the things that amuses me is that, or fascinates me, is that we exist in this connected world where a lot of the time we can be engaging with other people, and the context in which you're engaging from is invisible. So I could be participating in the conversation at the dinner, and then out at a friend's house, and then on the way to work, and in the bathroom, or on public transport, or sitting in a boardroom meeting, and nobody knows where you are, and nobody understands why you can't participate as meaningfully as you'd like to, or as meaningfully as they'd expect you to. All sorts of things. And so there might be delays between responses. It's a very fraught environment. So what is helpful about all of that, it can be really awkward, really inconvenient at times. And you're not sitting at a desk with a keyboard with a beautiful screen and a permanent fast internet connection all the time. We're not.
Yeah, but at the same time, we can be digital activists anywhere, anytime,
Yeah.
because we are always on. I mean, the distinction between being online, and as you said, you can be overwhelmed, and there's never any end to the work that you do, and so you can be overwhelmed, and being able to step back is important. But in
Yeah.
a sense, there's no clear separation between when we're on and off, because you've got a mobile phone that we can turn down, but you're still logged in. We don't log in much anymore, do we? Which is something people usually forget.
Well, that's really interesting too. And these days with my new Android phone, I've got the luxury of being able to set it to do not disturb mode, which literally means it will not disturb me under any circumstances. And now when I go to bed at night, you can select it to a priority list of only critical people can call me at certain times of the day. And if I don't want anyone to call me during a movie or a meeting, I'll just put it do not disturb. And it is off as far as I'm concerned. That's my login, is my availability to engage with this world out there.
Yeah. No, great. Are there any, I suppose my last question is, are there any specific examples of particular issues that arose in the past? Or, I mean, we've got the safe schools sort of controversy at the moment, and social media is obviously playing a key role in that, just as it does with every other issue. Are there any particular issues you'd like to speak to in your area of activism that you've seen social media be particularly helpful for, or even diminish the impact in any sense?
Last week I actually had an incredible response to, specifically in fact, to the Safe Schools Coalition issue that's currently being discussed in government, etc. And I've written a letter to a principal of a school that I'm trying to hopefully see them become a participant in the Safe Schools program, and I put an online, it was sort of an open letter that I'd written, and I put a copy of that on one of my blogs, and then put a link to that in a closed Facebook group. So it's not private, not secret, but it's not public, so anyone can join with approval, but limited audience, which had about 3,500 members. It's an old collegians group for this school. So past students and staff of this school are all there, and 3,500 people for this large school. And it was a fairly, let me put it politely, controversial email that I'd sent this principal. Well, it wasn't controversial, but it became very controversial. And my blog, where I'd posted a copy of this letter, doesn't normally get more than maximum maybe 15, 20 hits a day on an average day with no new content. When there's content, maybe 100 posts, 100 hits a day. On the one day, the first day that I posted this letter, clocked over 4,000 hits on the WordPress blog. Wow. Looking at the WordPress statistics. And within a few days after that, the WordPress page showed me 925 Facebook shares off that page. It went psycho. So posting it to a Facebook group with 3,500 people gave it reach. One link gave one blog reach in a big way, a very big way. So it did go viral very quickly. And I could tell that because apart from the WordPress app on my phone saying your stats are booming on this post, which it does detect.
I get that when I send an assignment example out on my blog, nothing else.
I looked and I saw within the first hour I had a few hundred hits, and I thought, oh, that's odd. Yeah, so I could tell that something had happened and I'd engaged. And in fact, what I did was I'd sparked that conversation that I wanted to have happen. Because for me as the activist trying to raise awareness around what I consider an important issue, when people are talking about the issue, whatever it is they're saying, it's important that they're talking about something to do with the issue.
Yeah, and there's an amazing sense of, I guess, satisfaction and the worthiness of the activity when you do see that kind of traction.
I mean, I don't want people just to be talking. I want people to be doing something and awareness to be raised, hopefully in a helpful direction. that would be even more successful for me. But raising awareness is a start.
Yeah. I remember back when I was in Geelong, this is about 10 years ago, I wrote a letter to the editor in response to an article, a religious institution's response, I think it was the Catholic Church, had criticised the instigation by a school of a kind of a safe party, a social evening, social outing within Geelong for LGBTI students, but everyone was actually welcome. So the criticism of partly being discriminatory was, it was unfounded. So I wrote a letter to the editor, and for several weeks saw the letters come back either.
This was to the printed paper.
This is analog form, and I mean I just remember writing that letter. With some people actually being concerned that I was writing the letter. That's kind of, I guess where we've come from in not so long time. But it was interesting that I didn't think, one, it would get published, and two, this very small, kind of letter got published. But then for weeks, arguments on both sides and responses came in the form of, it's probably half a dozen to a dozen letters to the editor. So that issue was ongoing. But it kind of does show the social media, the transformation, the fact that, that's half a dozen people, certainly, some readers, but social media is allowing a blog to go out through 1,000 shares to who knows how many reads. And
back in 1999 through Aleph, I was involved in a fairly, then wasn't, I seem to have attracted a lot of controversial things, but when you do this, you find controversy is never far away. A membership application to a community council, and that got weeks and weeks and weeks of front page, page 3, page 5, editorials, letters to the editor. This was back in 1999, so we're now talking about, 17 years ago. That was all, and that was well before a very connected internet. It was well before we were using mobile phone apps, well before social media was around. We were using email, and we were using faxes back then, because I remember getting faxes from England. I remember sending faxes to the editor. I remember using email, but there wasn't a great deal more than email and faxing back then in 1999. So 17 years ago, the message did get out, but it was through printed papers, and it was on radio. Engaging on radio or connecting to radio was a lot harder, as in me being an interviewee on radio, than it would be these days. So we have come a long way, and the tools have changed. I guess it's all about how much passion and how much you want to do something as an activist.
And it's amazing. You've upskilled and had to be open to the change for some time, and you've reaped the benefits of it.
Look, I mean, I think a lot of the work that I've done has been successful, if not in the short term, then in the long term. Absolutely. Very confident of that.
That's great. That's a great note to end on, because I'm always stressing that, and the same goes for me, we all have to be lifelong learners in this kind of transformative times where one week to another we just don't know what the next media will be. But thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure.
That's really fantastic stuff. And your perspective is something that, I try and talk to all different people who work in these areas who really know what's going on, because, it's something that we... students value incredibly highly.
If there was one thing I could just say is don't give up, don't lose heart, because if you are passionate about something, you can make that change.
Great. That's a good note to end on. Thank you very much for watching.